Hey, welcome to the C3 Victory podcast. We've been talking about true and healthy masculinity, and on the podcast today, we have Pastor Darren and Pastor Chapman from authors of The Happy Marriage, right here, great book, and they're going to have a conversation with us today about true and healthy masculinity in the context of marriage. We're going to talk about in the context of singleness. We're going to touch on sexuality as well. It's a great conversation. We can't cover everything, but we hope you really enjoy this. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey.
Thanks. Hey, strangers. We have the incredible Pastor Chapman with us and Pastor Darren Chapman. You're no stranger to the pod.
True.
But Darren and Beck, welcome to the podcast. For those who don't know, Beck is Pastor Darren's beautiful wife.
Better half.
Other half.
They're married. That's my point.
We are.
But it's good to have you guys.
Thanks, mate.
For another conversation. We're still in kind of like discussion about true and healthy masculinity. In the last podcast, we had Pastor Rach and Pastor Jez on, and we're kind of getting perspectives from a female point of view. Just it was a great conversation. We can't cover everything in these conversations. There's going to be things we miss by accident. It's not a lecture. It's not a it's not a preach or something. It's just a conversation. And I think, and so having you guys on, you guys are incredible, and you guys are pastors here, but not just that, you guys like minister into the space of into relationships, marriages, and so this conversation with you guys is really, we want to kind of just talk about in relationships, what does healthy masculinity talk about? We kind of touched on some of it in the last podcast actually, but we've got some great points to kind of talk about. We're going to talk about porn. We're going to talk about sexually driven masculinity. I think there's some great topics in here which we are not going to cover everything, but hopefully just touch on. And masculinity in singleness, masculinity in marriage. But to kind of just get the ball rolling, I just want to say, because Darren won't promote you won't promote your own book. But
it's weird too.
I'm going to promote it for you. Okay. Not because this is such a helpful tool. This is The Happy Marriage by Darren Chapman, and I'm sure Beck had a lot of help in this. I don't know. Inspired by Beck.
A lot, yes.
But The Happy Marriage, and it's a guidebook to intimacy and closeness. This is great. It's not long. It's kind of thin and easy to get through, and it's a guidebook. Like, you can, if you need help to like connect and stuff, and the principles in this book are incredible and will help a lot of people. So I encourage you to find that, Google it. You can find it anywhere, can't you?
Yeah, pretty much anywhere.
Google it. The Happy Marriage, Darren Chapman.
Kindle audiobook. Yeah.
Kindle. It's so good. Get it for someone who you think might need it, and it'll bless them. So, but
thanks, man.
But you guys minister currently, like going around to a whole bunch of churches.
Yes.
Like and minister into relationships. Do you want to share quickly a little bit about that? Just like touch on it quickly.
Sure.
Like, what is it you do?
Look, we got an opportunity to speak. I got an opportunity to speak after the launch of the book at like a C3 like national conference, which was like super daunting but awesome. And then from then, we just got a lot of invites flowing in to go and do, I guess, marriage workshops around the country.
That's cool.
And we kind of pinch ourselves because it's just awesome that we get to do it. We get to do it together. We get to help a lot of couples, and we get to like travel and be together and get weekends away. It's great. It's like so many wins.
Like, they're super practical, and I think that's for us is what's really important. Like, you want to take something away. You don't want to sort of just go and hear a whole pile of talk, like someone just talking at you.
Yeah.
But you want to go away with practical things that you can implement in your own relationship. Yeah. And people want to feel normal. Like, we haven't got everything perfectly worked out, you know. What? It's not like we never I know.
It's not perfect.
I know, we're not perfect. But we are prepared to share and sort of try and be authentic about what happens in our world, and that tends to help people along the way.
That's really cool.
We love it.
And how long have you guys been married now?
We've been married for 26 years.
26 years?
Yes.
Yep.
Wow.
I know. 26. We look so young, don't we?
Yeah.
It's hard to believe.
So young.
You guys are young and fresh.
Vibrant.
You're just starting.
We're just getting going.
It's the beginnings. That's awesome. That's cool. So cool that you're doing that stuff. And it's good to have you on the pod today. And I want to kick off talking about marriage. I think if we kick off masculinity, the chat around masculinity in marriage, and we did kind of touch on it in the last podcast. We touched on, the idea of the man leading and wives submitting, and we kind of unpacked that a little bit. But I would love to hear. I think there's so much to say on it, and I don't think we got to a whole bunch on that. But I would love to hear from you guys a little bit on that, like that aspect of masculinity in marriage. And we've been talking about throughout all the podcasts that our model is Jesus.
Yeah.
Right.
This is not just our opinion on masculinity. This is not just what we think is great and good and what the parts that we like. It's like, no, our model's Jesus.
It's good.
But I'd love for you to comment on masculinity in marriage and the healthy version of that. Like, what does that look like in marriage?
Do you want to start?
No, you can start.
Okay. I don't want to steamroll you.
I know.
Like I do sometimes.
I know. It's fine.
Like we were talking about this earlier, and I think there's a lot of toxic ways of leading in your marriage.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unhealthy ways of leading in your marriage. And we haven't always got that right. I haven't always got that right. And like if you look at some of the really, I guess, unhealthy ways, like bossing your wife and your family around and kind of domineering leadership, or if you could even call that leadership, or on the other end of the spectrum, like just laziness and
not leading at all.
Right, not leading and being insecure and or hesitant or unsure, or how do I lead, or how do I, what's my role here? How do I function in this marriage and this family as the leader of the? The Bible doesn't say lead the home. The Bible says the husband's head of the wife.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? And it's easy to take that in the wrong way and to apply worldly principles to that concept of headship, that concept of leadership. And if we don't look at what the word says, the Bible, and what Jesus says about how we are to exist as husband and wife, then we're just influenced by the world.
Yeah.
And so that's where there can be domination or autocratic kind of leadership, or like we said, the other direction is just not doing anything.
I think that's really interesting that you bring that up, because that didn't come up in the last podcast. We're kind of talking about this a little bit, that like kind of the other end of the spectrum. Like, when we think of toxic, kind of just unhealthy masculinity, you think of like, this domineering kind of thing. But you've just touched on kind of like
just not
the polar opposite end.
Totally.
I'd like to hear,
because that was me, right?
Yeah, I think that it often can go one way or the other. There's that domineering kind of like, I'm the boss of you, you'll do what I say kind of, just do what dad says and everybody will be happy idea. Or you go the other direction and it's like a guy might be afraid to lead, or go, I don't really know how to lead, so therefore I will just not. But in the absence of leadership, the woman will rise up and lead.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I guess, we probably had, I don't know whether I'd say it was, the first 10 years, but certainly 5 years, 5 to 10, that, Darren probably erred on not leading.
Because I wasn't sure. I didn't know how to do it. I was like, how do I lead my wife? What does that even mean?
Yeah, right.
Like,
and I'm not a quiet, whilst I'm introverted, I'm not I have opinions, I have thoughts on things, and I'm a doer, so I'll get a job done. So if there's a gap, I'll fill it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of women that are like that, because
absolutely.
things are going to work, like things are going to run. So there's a family happening here, let's go.
Yes.
So if you're not going to do it, I guess it's me.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting.
I think I allowed Beck to do that, not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
But I agree. In the absence of leadership, women will fill that gap. They will lead. And I think there's a lot of husbands out there that let their wives lead because they're not sure how to take the lead or what to do or how to do that in a healthy
version.
way.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. How do we do that without conflict? Or is it okay to have conflict about that? Or am I happy just being lazy and just let her do it? Like,
And I think that was probably me for a while. Like you were just doing so much. I got to a stage where I was helping around the house. Like I was helping to do things, but Beck was still guiding that and leading in that space for a long time. And I was like, cool, this is great. Like I get to do me and have fun and blah, blah, blah. She's got the responsibility. But it was when I had to, like we said, like that moment when I came home from work one day and our twins were little and our 3 boys were super young. And I realized I got this major light bulb moment of when I walk in the house after a big day of work, this is not my time to put my feet up and relax.
It's not Darren time.
No. It's not like, where's my pipe and
just going to have a little
slippers?
me time now.
You know?
Oh, that sounds good though. Like you're saying that and I'm like, that sounds good.
That does sound good.
I can get behind that.
Hey, Jess, where's my pipe and slippers? Like that would not go down well. But, it's real. It was about me learning that when I walked into those doors, I needed to engage. I needed to take responsibility for my role in the home as dad, as husband, as leader, as and so, the boys have gone crazy. Like Beck's pulling her hair out and I'm like coming home going, cool, it's my time to relax now. And that's like
because she's just been at home with the kids all day, like doing nothing.
She's had it pretty
doing
easy.
yoga,
She hasn't
sipping
had to
lattes.
work.
Isn't that's what everyone she's doing yoga, sipping lattes.
I think back then it was sipping instant coffee because that's all we could afford.
Yes. Yeah. But we know that that's not right.
Yeah.
We know now that that's such a naive view of what the wife at home with kids looks like. You know?
But also
she's
fatherhood.
exhausted.
Yeah.
Give the woman a break.
So passivity is unhealthy.
Yes.
Right.
I recognize that in like I reckon I err on that side of like, where's my pipe and slippers? Like, and maybe it was because I was raised like by a single mum too. So I wonder if that's got something to do with it. I don't know, but I wonder if like the majority of guys out there are the more like. It's the passive thing. We're like, and maybe in the current culture and climate, we're like, we don't know.
I agree.
We don't know how to lead. We don't want to do it wrong. We don't want to be like.
We don't want to be domineering.
We don't want to do the wrong thing.
And
so
we don't want to
go the
offend
other
or
way.
hurt our wife. We don't want to. Yeah, I agree.
So there's kind of like 2 versions of unhealthy masculinity in marriage there, I guess. And maybe, and I feel like the passive one's probably the majority of people. I don't know. I'm sure there's the opposite end of the spectrum out there, but. I just don't know that too many dominating kind of people. What's a healthy, you kind of touched on what the healthy version of that is like, which is taking responsibility.
Yes. Modeling the right kind of culture that you want to set in your home.
Yeah.
Modeling a culture of love and of service and generosity and kindness and
what might that look like? What does that look like for you, Beck? Like, from Daz, what is like servanthood, love? Like, what does that look like practically?
It looks like cooking dinner all the time.
Nice. It's not like a joke, but I do.
Hey, I heated up leftovers last night for everybody.
I know.
Does that count?
I appreciate that.
Counts for something.
I think it looks like patience when naturally you might be internally having a moment, but yet he'll choose patience, just take a breath and
sometimes I do that.
And that's a form of self-sacrifice, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. It has changed for us in the last 15 years. I think there's been a huge amount of growth, much more so than in the first 10 years. I think that it just keeps. I think that the more he leans into God as his strength, and the more he's learned from a revelation of, husbands sacrifice and they go first, ouch, geez, that's hard. But I see that in practice these days, whereas perhaps, in the first 5-10 years, it was if I asked things of him, he would do it, sometimes begrudgingly. But now there's a it looks like a willingness anyway. There's a willingness to not wait for me to make something happen or ask for something to happen. And there's a sharing. He's looking for ways. So there's a sharing of mental load that was never there before. There's even just an acknowledgement that there is a mental load. That in many relationships, the woman will carry that. It's not in all relationships, but often the woman will be more likely to carry that mental load. I guess the question that often can be asked around that is that, you know, what is it that you say? Who buys the gifts? Yeah,
who buys gifts in the home?
Oh, we're still figuring that out. Like, who's responsible? It's like so-and-so's birthday, we're like driving to the party. You get the gift, I get the gift. Oh, no. What? Oh, we're going to stop off to get a gift.
Yeah, right.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, gift giving is one of those areas of mental load. No. Like gifts, like if if one of your kids has a birthday to attend, who's organising that gift? Yeah. Because most of the time it's the wife. And she's organising that, and it's just part of that mental load of managing and juggling the whole household. Yeah. And so the guy doesn't even think about it.
What? I'll be a little bit of a devil's advocate.
Go for it.
What about? So I'd imagine some guys are like, I'm working hard at like my 9 to 5. It's probably not 9 to 5. It's probably like 8 to 7. Yep. You know, I'm working
nights
my butt
and weekends.
off, and some weekends, and like. I've got a load there,
right?
That is big, and I'm bringing in the bacon. I'm supporting the family,
totally.
And so when it comes to walking in the door and want pipe and slippers, or you know, I love that image. I guess I'd love you to speak into that because I think some guys will say, well, you know, my part of my job's done. Right. Like I worked hard all day, and that's my mental load. Now I'm off shift or something.
Sure.
And here I am, and then that's her job or something.
I think around the 1990s it shifted considerably.
The 90s, you reckon? Yeah.
I would say about the 90s, because as a child of the 80s, I still saw my mum, my friends' mums still, at least in our city, a lot were at home, and any work they did outside the home was often volunteer work. It was not as many of them were in paid roles. Fast forward another, to the 90s, another 10 years or so after that, more and more women were back in the workforce, even if it was just a couple of days a week. Yeah. Fast forward again, when women go in to have a baby, when are you going back to work is often the first question they ask, whereas in the 80s that was never a question. Yeah, there was an assumption that they possibly weren't ever going back to work. But by now it's a given that you're going back to work. It's just a case of when. Yep. Will that be 3 months, 6 months, 1 month? Have you even stopped working because of all the side hustles and things you've got going on?
Right.
We've got a very different landscape where there's parts of us, I think, that sit in this space still where we think about how it used to be, but it's not real life anymore. The cost of living is too high. And I mean, my work with families, I see it in just the conversations. It's a real identifier, I think, as to where we are as a society, in that when I was at school canteen was run by the mums.
Yep.
And now the school canteens are closing down because they can't get volunteers. And I'm like, it's because they all have to work. And so usually it's mum and dad working.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's right. It's both people are working.
Right. And the reality is, hey, we're all tired. Welcome to being an adult.
So it's like a complete shift. It's more like a complete shared responsibility.
Yes. Yeah. It needs to be shared, and sort of looking at, of course there's times where, one of you might work part-time and you are going to carry the times where I've worked part-time, not full-time. I've carried more of that mental load. Now that I work full-time, we both work full-time.
You work more hours than I do.
It's a sort of a bit more of a juggle, but I'd say that these days Darren carries more of that mental load than I do because of the nature of my work.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
Yep.
I think it comes down to the model of marriage that you're operating on.
Yeah.
Because there's, I guess, depending on everyone's circumstances, it's
Right.
unique to each.
Very different.
That's
couple.
right.
It's about
So
understanding
1950s model of marriage was 80-20 or 90-10.
Yep.
So the husband did most of the work outside the home and the wife did most of the work inside the home. It was very imbalanced in terms of equality, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then these days, you have much more of a 50-50 push.
Yeah.
But that's great. Like fairness, we talk about this a fair bit. Like fairness is good.
Great place to start.
Yes, but it's not love. But it's good to get a starting point of fairness and go equality. Like what's on your plate? What's on my plate? How can we together as a team juggle all of the stuff that's in our life? The chores and the gift buying and the paying the bills and looking after the home and, or the car and the lawn, everything. Like all of the stuff that's in our life together. How are we doing that? Not what are you doing to make my life easier? Right?
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
So the husband needs to come home, same scenario, the husband needs to come home and still play his role.
Yep.
His role that they have mutually agreed on. Because it's not 80-20 and it shouldn't be 50-50. Because 50-50 means, we're equal and fair in everything. And then we are moving towards a very transactional relationship.
So, for example, the 50-50 might be, he got a night out with the boys, therefore next week I get my night out with the girls. Or he spent $20 on something that was just for him. I get to spend $20 then.
Yeah, okay. All right.
And
so that's a 50-50.
That's 50-50 model.
Could that be helpful for some people though?
I think it's a great starting point.
Okay,
Yes,
all right.
100%.
So it's it's still, it's not,
Yes.
but there's better.
Taking into account your context
Yes.
and make it 50-50.
Yes, okay.
Definitely.
So
but then add love and generosity.
Yeah, right. What would that look like on top of that scenario that you just mentioned? He got to go out he had a night to himself last week. What would change in that scenario? Well, when you add love and grace and stuff.
I think that the 50-50 is very much a me focus.
Yes. Okay.
Whereas 50-50 plus love and generosity is an us focus. So it's not they did, therefore I do. It's like maybe Bex had a massive day and she's come home stressed and had to deal with whatever, a parent or something massive has happened with a child or something. And so I have just spent the last hour cooking and stuff and I might just clean up the kitchen and wash up. Whereas
our deal has always been, one of us cooks, one of us cleans up.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the 50-50.
That's a 50-50 transactional tit for tat.
And so, my job's done now. I've done the cooking. I'm going to rest.
Okay.
But actually, I need to love and support and sacrifice and serve my wife, which is the point of marriage.
Yes.
That's mutual sacrifice means equals mutual fulfillment.
Yeah, wow.
So
that's really cool.
This is where healthy masculinity in a biblical context is so powerful because the husband sacrifices himself for the wife.
Yes.
And that is biblical.
Which is what Jesus modeled this.
Yes, right. Yeah. Jesus modeled it. So like the meaning of marriage, Tim Keller, brilliant, absolutely. We talk about it all the time. So good. And he says those words, mutual sacrifice equals mutual fulfillment. Both the husband and the wife lay down their life for each other and each are fulfilled in their sacrifice. But the husband always goes first.
I love that.
Okay?
Yeah.
Husbands
in
love
practice,
your wives.
do you still love it? Because it's got to be hard. I said in practice, do you still love it? Because it's got to be hard.
Yeah, I know. Yes. You mean like the husband gets to go to the buffet first, right? No, I know what you mean.
Like the husband sacrifices first. The husband always goes first in loving, in being generous, in
he's not waiting for
withholding.
Yeah.
Not withholding love or sex, but withholding his desire or what he really wants to happen. We only have a certain amount of money for this, therefore she is going to go and buy the outfit or...
Thanks, babe.
Yeah, it's free outfits for you.
There you go. Well,
that's what I'm taking away from this podcast.
It's recorded. You get to go buy that outfit.
Just play this every single day as you walk in the door. And
I love that. I think you just painted a really, really great picture of healthy masculinity in marriage. And I think that'll help a lot of people, because I think it is beyond the 50-50, you know, like there's times where that really helps, because it's like,
Yes.
there's clear expectations
That's
of who,
right.
you know.
And
Absolutely.
there's a lot of
Jesus-
value in starting that way.
Yeah, but Jesus, he didn't,
Right.
his sacrifice wasn't transactional.
Yeah.
It was what he gave. There was, like, we didn't do anything to deserve it, but he gave. And
Yes.
it's not like, we don't just take initiative to do these like acts of service and love and things in our marriage, because they've done the right things to deserve it.
Right.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
I'm doing it because I'm modeling Jesus, you know, like
That's great.
I find in our
Love
marriage,
anyway.
I
Yes.
find I have to be I choose to be, not all the time, don't get it perfect, the first one to apologize or go first in reconciling maybe an argument or a disagreement.
Yes.
Like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to humble myself first in this situation, even though there might be areas where I think I'm wrong. I'm like, no, I'm going to go I'm going to go first. And so I think that's
great.
really cool.
I think there's an element in that, Simo, of like that whole concept, like, you know, when you think sort of in business or in leadership, like boss versus leader.
Oh yeah.
True.
You know, a boss just tells people how it's going to happen, whereas a leader takes them on a journey and like works with them rather than just
Great.
you will do this. And I think that when you lead as a husband, like it's an example, you know, in a business sense, it's an example to your workers.
Yeah.
But it's an example to your family, like that you're prepared to, you know, ask for forgiveness or,
Great.
you know, both ways.
Great.
Ask for it or extend it. And sort of put yourself out there to go, I'm going to be vulnerable at this point, and like, and this is part of how I lead, like showing, you know what, it can be done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's showcasing it, like being
Yes.
the example.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, babe.
I think that's really cool. I think we've touched on some great aspects of leading in family and marriage and stuff like that. I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about singleness.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think we can, and I think we acknowledge this, like in church world, and I think like we've had some good discussions about this, and I'm sure you'd agree, Beck. Like we do, I think in the past we've championed marriage so much, and we need to champion marriage. We need to champion healthy
Yeah.
marriage. Sometimes we just leave out people who are single, and
Absolutely.
we maybe talk about marriage in a way that makes single people feel like they're lesser than or left out of, or
Yeah.
they've got a piece missing, you know,
Right.
which is not the case. And so
Absolutely.
I'd love to kind of hear you guys speak into, you know, in the context of healthy masculinity, I guess, for single guys,
Yes.
that
great.
that can be a blessed space. It's not.
Right.
It's not.
It's not a waiting zone.
Not just a waiting zone.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
like, yeah, exactly. Like we get to like speak into singles and people who are looking for romantic relationships as well. And that space is opening up for us a lot more. And like, we always just want to say to them, like, you're not a second-class citizen.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the church, and I sort of say the church, like big C, like I think we've actually done a pretty rubbish job over many, many years of how we celebrate marriage at the expense of singleness.
Yeah.
And like it shouldn't be one or the other. Like they're both amazing. Like they both can be amazing and they both can be pretty rubbish. If you don't steward whichever season you're in well.
Wow.
And so if you don't steward your marriage well, man, that's going to be horrible. But if you don't steward your singleness well, also horrible.
Wow.
You can be lonely in marriage and lonely in singleness. Like, so
Wow. Yeah.
whatever
I love that
season you are
concept.
in, steward it well. It's like, you know, before you get married, people, you know, in the church will, and probably just in general, but certainly my experience in the church, you know, when you get married, then blah, 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 you know, fill the blank
Life
space.
starts when you get married.
That's right. Like, you know, you're just sitting around waiting for your knight in shining armor or whatever the case may be. Once you get married, oh, when you have kids, then you'll understand. Like there's always this next season
right.
and, you haven't quite made it. And it's like, when do we make it?
Is there an arrival point?
Is there like, is it when you're 80? Like, is it once you've got grandchildren, then we'll understand what life is really all about? Like, whatever season you're in, you steward it well.
I love that. I don't think I've ever heard someone talk about stewarding your singleness.
Right.
Yes.
I think because singleness, like when I think of it, when I was younger or whatever, you just think of like, oh, freedom, all the things, all the time, whatever you want, And I've never thought of it with the concept of like stewarding that season of your life.
Yes.
I think I love that concept. I think that's going to help a lot of people. Like,
because the season might be
what does that look
5 years. It might be 30 years.
That's
it might be the rest of your life. Either way, you want to steward it well.
Yeah. What does stewarding your singleness look like? So for some single people out there, what does that look like?
I think that we need to first understand that it's a gift.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that the church has painted marriage as a gift,
Yeah.
but never really celebrated, like you said, babe, but never celebrated or painted singleness as a gift. And certainly if you are seeking a spouse, you can often resent God if you have to wait for too long because you don't appreciate the gift of singleness.
Wow.
And you just think, I'm going to be complete when I get a wife. But you're not an incomplete person without a spouse.
Right.
In fact, in the New Testament, Paul is like clear. Don't get married unless you need to.
Yeah, he's like, I wish you could live like I do kind of thing, wasn't he?
That's right.
When I first read that, I was like, whoa, okay.
Right. But he actually says, don't marry unless you need to. But because most of you can't survive not being with someone, then you should marry.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Was it 1 Corinthians 7? Go and look it up.
He's so powerful, he didn't need to get married.
Right. But then,
Go, Paul.
then the
Calls it as he
images,
sees it.
the image is then
Cool.
painted that, marriage will make me happy.
Like
Marriage
will fulfill me.
Marriage
kind of
will
thing.
fulfill me.
Does a
I won't
marriage
be
will-
lonely
That's
if I
right.
am married.
And
Wow, yeah.
one of the harshest things that some people have to endure in life is a lonely marriage.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
It's
You
probably-
would experience that with what you guys do. Like, do you see that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's easier to be a lonely single than a lonely married,
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, well,
right? Like Pete Scazzero talks about both being vocations, like thinking about it in the context of not just a season. Oh, I'm in my single season, therefore this is going to end soon. But actually a vocation that I need to go, not a vocation in terms of a job, but a vocation in life where this is where I'm at right now. I need to fully embrace it and enjoy what God can show me and grow me in this
And use me.
and use me and work and partner with me in this season or vocation.
yeah.
So, like, I think a healthy biblical masculinity in terms of a single person, you need to be like working on taking responsibility for every area of your life
Right.
and not just thinking I'm waiting for my spouse.
Yeah.
But how can I love and serve God and love the people around me and build the church? And how can I advance the kingdom? How can I be the best me possible?
Yeah.
I'm not in this waiting zone where I've been sidelined until this magical person comes along and makes me complete. No, you're a fully fledged human being.
Yes.
You're not incomplete without a wife or without a husband.
Yeah.
Embrace that season, enjoy it. As you like Paul says again, he's just like, you've got this time to love God and pursue the kingdom, and you're in this unique spot. But often people neglect their spirituality, pursue the things of the world, and don't take responsibility for their spirituality, their journey of their, like, have a shower. Like,
Clean yourself.
have good hygiene.
Yeah.
Like, take responsibility for every single part of your life.
Oh, I don't have to, take responsibility for my finances because I don't have a wife and children.
No, that's poor stewardship
Right.
again.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think, like, I guess I could imagine a woman looking for a partner is looking for a guy who's stewarding all these things well.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's exactly right.
you know,
like you shoot yourself in the foot.
That's
Yeah.
right. They're
You're
incredibly attractive qualities for a woman who's,
Yes.
considering marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're missing the boat by not stewarding it well.
Yeah.
And then you run the risk of meeting someone or who's also not stewarding well.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've got equal level of dysfunction,
Yep.
and that doesn't play nicely either. When you've got, because marriage doesn't complete us.
No.
Marriage is two broken people who then mesh their lives together.
Yeah.
And now we've got amplified brokenness.
I've heard it said marriage is a magnifier.
Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
true.
Like it just magnifies all the brokenness in you. Like
Yeah.
oh, thanks, my wife
great
sees all that.
resource, like the best resource that we've ever found
Yeah.
for singleness and those who are wanting to get married is Loveology by John Mark Comer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great
Oh, I
book.
reckon.
Hands
Easy to read
down,
too.
the best resource out there
Yep.
for a biblical,
that.
healthy understanding of singleness and dating and sex and marriage and where you're wanting to move towards. Get that in your hands or in your ears. It is incredible.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. I love that. Like, Jesus was single.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
the most complete human that ever walked on the face of the planet.
Right.
The most healthy man. You know,
Yes.
there was no defect, brokenness, deficiency
Right.
in him. Like he was God. He was fully man, fully God.
Yes.
He didn't get married.
No.
I mean, he was complete in his
Yeah.
singleness.
That's exactly
and I think
right. We forget that.
Jesus did a solid for all the single people. Is
Yes.
that bad to say? I don't know.
Absolutely. No, man, that's good.
But yeah, I guess we want to give.
so true.
We want to champion single people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In their season, like they're not. They don't have to wait to enter their calling and their purpose and the things God has for them to
Yes,
when they get
that's
like
exactly
it's
right.
now. God has it for now. God's not waiting for you to find someone. You can be fulfilled now. You can be whole now. You can be growing. I just love that. Steward your singleness well. I think
So good.
there's like a whole book in that. Like you could write a book on that. There you go. There's a book idea.
Yeah, that'd be single.
You probably already had that idea, but
That'd be
single. I want to
Not a bad idea.
coming kind of out of that concept though. I want to kind of. I'd love to talk about this idea of, like we're saying, we don't need a partner to complete us, and in the same way, I don't know if I'm going to word this well, but like, there's this idea in our culture that we have like this sexual. I want to talk about kind of sex and masculinity and marriage and relationships a little
right.
bit like that. There we have a sexual identity.
Yeah, okay.
And that if we, I guess for the single people, maybe they're abstaining, like, you know, as Christians, scripture asks us to abstain from sex till marriage.
Absolutely.
But there's this idea that, oh, what about your sexual identity? Like you're incomplete without a sexual identity. And there's in culture, like sexuality and masculinity, it's almost like we feel
inseparable.
Yeah, inseparable. Like my sexuality is a vital part of my masculinity. Like I need the sexual part of my life to be thriving in order to be a complete and healthy man.
Right.
But we just talked about Jesus,
Right.
who was complete healthy man. Obviously, scripture says, you know, if you're burning with lust or like if you
Burn with
desire
passion or
with
whatever
passion, not lust.
Yeah.
But with passion, like it's good to get married. Like that's healthy. It's
Right,
good.
right.
But I'd love to talk into this idea of like a sexual driven masculinity that is probably unhealthy in our culture. And I think, like, would you say that that kind of mentality, like sexually driven masculinity, can be detrimental in marriage, in our relationships? And how is it detrimental in our marriage and relationships?
Oh, wow.
That's a big question. It could be a whole nother podcast. But
True. Look, I love what what Pastor Josh Kelsey said from Fount NYC maybe 6 months ago. And he said, sex is not a need.
okay, unpack that.
Like, it's a bonus. It's not a need. It's not, I am not Now, my wife would say, "You think it is?"
I was going to say, I'm interested to hear the end of this sentence.
Like it's not a fundamental need like water and shelter and relationship and safety, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Sex is not in there.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And now, in terms of a healthy marriage, sex is a vital component of that.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, let's not say that it's not important, but it's not
There's a whole heap of guys listening, and they're
They all
like,
just
"What?
turn
Whoa.
We've just halved the listeners.
What are you doing, man? What are you talking about?"
Yeah. My wife's not listening to this episode. Delete it off her phone. No. But like, we have to put sex in context of a healthy life together and not a requirement for me to survive and exist as a man.
Yeah.
Okay? It's gotta come from a thriving, loving relationship where each person, each spouse is serving and loving the other one. Yes, it's I'll fight for sex as a really important part of marriage, definitely, hands down, all the time. But especially for single men, sex is like the marriage is the context at which a healthy expression of your sexual nature needs to be in. And so the desire for sex often means that guys get married young and early. Christian guys get married young and early. Like, for me, that was a huge priority.
For a heap of young Christian guys, it was
Absolutely.
a massive, part of that, right?
But then lust blinds us to all of the other important elements of relationships that we don't often consider.
Wow.
And we enter into lifelong partnerships called marriage too quickly, too early, and too easily because we think that sex is a need.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not a fundamental need for my survival.
Wow.
It's enjoyable. It's a gift from God. It's to be enjoyed in the context of a loving marriage and sexual relationship with your spouse. And it should be there. It's healthy. It's important. Like, don't hear me say it's not important.
Yes, it's 100% important, right?
Yeah, 100% important for a healthy marriage.
But is it the overemphasis that culture, like...
That's right.
Have we been indoctrinated by culture that it's not more than it should be? Like, there's obviously the glorification of sex in culture,
right?
The glamification of sex in culture
Definitely.
That's not real, like in movies and stuff like that. But it portrays something that is idealistic and euphoric, like it's going to be the thing that completes me, fulfills me,
right,
and saves me,
Yes. Absolutely.
But you're saying it's vital and important in marriage, but it's not.
It can't
be that thing.
Like, it can't become an idol. It can't become God to you.
Yeah.
Like, it can't become the thing that everything rests upon. And this is where that glorification of sex in culture has made it so dangerous. When we bring culture into marriage, we bring society and the world's perspective and the world's mindset into our kingdom marriages. We distort the view of sex and we raise the importance of it. And because we have so many opportunities for comparison, and we live in a world that is comparison heavy.
Yep.
What I often then don't do is spend that energy connecting with my spouse to build a wonderful relationship and therefore a wonderful sexual relationship. I just feel lonely and annoyed that I'm not getting the kind of sex that I think everyone else in the world is having.
Yeah. I think that,
So, yes, very important, very vital for a loving marriage, but it can't become the thing that your marriage revolves around.
Wow.
And I've struggled with that in the past.
I think a lot of guys.
I
think it's natural. I would say, I've been in that boat for sure.
Totally. And we have, I don't know, babe, you can speak into this too, but because we are we take a lot from the world into our marriage.
Yeah.
And we think that because I'm a sexual being, which is not wrong. That's great. Fantastic. I'm wired that way.
That's right. God made us that
God
way.
made us that way.
Yeah.
That's not wrong. That's not bad. That's great. Fantastic. But how I channel that and temper that so that it's in the right context with the right one person and enjoyable and fulfilling. And when I'm unfulfilled, I'm not seeking it elsewhere. I am just having conversations.
It's directed back into the marriage.
That's exactly right.
What are your thoughts?
I think when you open, how do I word this delicately? Look, I guess when that sort of, chemistry, heat of the moment, idea that, sex too early outside of marriage, Darren touched on it before, it blinds you to the things that matter. And so the things that matter, you might be sort of like thinking, I want a spouse. Ultimately, I want a spouse who has X, Y, Z characteristics. There's things that once you start having sex with a person that you just don't see anymore. Now, everybody else might see it because they're not having sex with them, and it might be just the basics of, hey, when we go out for dinner, do they treat each other? Like, do they treat other people kindly?
Yeah,
like, are they nice to the waiter, or are they an absolute jerk? Once you start having sex, it's like you sort of like, there's a few blinders that start coming up, and you just go, that's okay, that's fine, because once you start that level of intimacy and that level of connection with somebody else, you just don't see some of those things that actually long-term, that's really going to matter to you. And, 5 years down the track when you're out for dinner and they're an absolute jerk to the waitress, you're embarrassed. And you're kind of going, I'm going to the bathroom every time he calls them over because I'm embarrassed to be with them.
Wow.
You've been blinded to these aspects.
You've been blinded. Now I'm seeing that come out in my children 10 years later.
Oh, wow.
That is not a quality that I want my children to have. But yet I started having sex really early, missed some of those red flags.
Yes.
Fundamentals, yep.
Yeah, what I really wanted, but I got a little bit, carried away and...
And that's kind of that single-mindedness that we're talking about, right? Like, like sex is the
pinnacle.
It's the pinnacle. It's like, it's 90% of our marriage. That's the most important thing. It's like, it's a percentage of marriage importance, and there's lots of other percentages of things that are super important.
That's right.
It's just not the only thing.
It's just not the only thing, but it's held up in culture like it's the thing. And if that doesn't work, nothing could work.
And if you're not having Hollywood sex, then there's something wrong. Like, I love what Laurie Watson, George Fowler talk about on Foreplay Radio Sex Therapy, right? Great podcast. Only if you're married. Don't listen to it if you're not.
And don't listen to it when the kids are in the car.
Yeah, good call. Highly
does
explicit.
Not sound like,
highly explicit, but not dirty. You know what I mean?
If a friend jumps in the car and you got that on, like, just watch out.
Maybe press pause. But they talk about, I forgot what I was going to say. Where were we?
Oh, gee.
Oh, man. They talk about...
like sex being the pinnacle of anything.
So they talk about, 1 in 10 sexual experiences will be amazing.
Yeah.
1 in 10 will be an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And you'll have a whole bunch of sex in the middle that will just be, okay, cool.
That was great. It wasn't
That was
Hollywood.
fine. It wasn't Hollywood. It wasn't, it wasn't terrible. It was, cool. That's all right.
Yeah.
And that's pretty normal.
Yeah.
So, but what we do is we say, if we're not having mind-blowing sex at the frequency that the person who wants sex the most wants it, then there's something terribly wrong.
Yes.
And that is an unhealthy view of the importance of sex in a healthy marriage.
And I wonder if there's a lot of guys that, like, they struggle with that because we've been kind of, like, indoctrinated by culture, right?
Absolutely.
And we think, I'm not being fulfilled as a man because I'm not having Hollywood sex 5 nights a week.
Right.
Yeah.
And they feel lesser of, and this is what we're kind of talking about, like, no, that's not the case. You can be fulfilled, and
that's right.
That might not feel like that for the guy in the situation, right? And it's about, we've got to kind of start to shift our mindset and align ourselves with what love in marriage and relationships is, which is exemplified by Jesus.
Yes.
And
so if you're like husbands, agape your wives. Just reflect on that.
What's agape mean? Because
so agape is sacrificial, unconditional, pursuing, actionable.
Yep.
Never-ending love.
So good.
So if a husband is going to treat his wife like that, that's not all about what, like, my needs I'm not getting fulfilled. Fulfill her. Love her. Keep loving the girl.
Yes.
Make your focus her, not yourself.
Which is not easy, right?
No. I fall into this all the time.
Yeah.
I'll be like, yeah, poor Darren. It's not as perfect as what I want it to be. And then I'll be like, how much did I just make that whole few days about me?
Yeah.
And in fact, husbands, love your wives. It's not husbands, love yourself through your wife.
Wow.
It's husbands, love your wives.
Wow.
So if Christ died for us with this great act of grace, not like hoping but not expecting us to love him back.
Yeah.
We often have this and I did this for years and sometimes still do. Like, if I do this for her, maybe she'll do this for me.
Yeah, right.
It's that loving, hoping.
If I do this thing for her, she should do this thing for me.
That's right. Or yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's probably even more so. She should have because
She should have because I did.
Yeah.
And that's transactional and that's not agape.
Do you reckon, Beck, that attitude, do you feel like a woman?
Like I can see it a mile away?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like do our wives notice this attitude? Like can sense it? Like, he's doing that because he wants to do this? Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. She can see it.
And you can see it a mile away and you don't always bring it up.
Yep.
And I do think it's really important for wives to, I'm speaking from a wife's perspective, I guess, but I mean, whoever is the higher libido person, there's usually a higher and a lower libido in the relationship. Right. Like I don't think we've talked to any couples in the hundreds of couples we've spoken to where they're like, oh yeah, we are like right on, exactly the same, but
if you're out there, please get in touch.
You're a unicorn.
You're a unicorn. We'd like to talk to you.
Oh, that's right. But I think whoever is the one with a lower libido does need, like, there is a responsibility in a married relationship to, like, part of loving each other and sacrificing for each other is sometimes going there anyway.
Yeah.
And,
Totally.
just because I might know that I can see the
glint in his eye.
it's you can see it a mile away.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that just because you can see, there's an ulterior motive here, it doesn't mean you don't shut down. I see the ulterior motive. Like, that's right.
Oh, no.
And it doesn't mean he's not trying.
That's exactly right.
Doesn't mean he's not trying
this is
to
where
love
grace,
and serve.
I guess grace comes into.
That's exactly right.
That's
situation.
Exactly right.
For sure.
That's where, back to Tim Keller, mutual sacrifice means mutual fulfillment.
Yeah.
So it's not just one person doing all the sacrifice and the other person abusing that sacrifice by withholding or distancing or withdrawing. It's both. It's a commitment from both husband and wife to serve and love and give, knowing that the serving and loving and giving of their spouse is going to fulfill them as well. And that's where faith and trust come in.
That's so good.
Yeah.
This is a great convo. I mean, this could be a whole series. I'm trying to think.
Maybe one day.
Do we go down that rabbit hole? But like, this is the kind of stuff that you guys are talking about, you're writing about in your blog, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is awesome. Our producer, Chris, is just messaging me and
to say, hurry up, time's up.
I think we're running out of time. We did want to talk about, I did mention at the start we're going to talk about porn, but that's like probably another half an hour conversation. So
totally,
it's a big can of worms to open.
It's a big can of worms to open.
But it's misplaced sexuality.
It's misplaced. And I guess that ties
highly
into...
misplaced. And it's... so many dangers to porn, like because you'll feel fulfilled in a wrong way.
And that ties back into what we was talking about before,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's this idea of a man, like we're talking about true healthy masculinity, that, I need this aspect of my life, like that it's connected to my masculinity. If this isn't working, I don't feel like a man, but there's been a level of indoctrination from the world.
That's right.
And it's not that aspect of us, yes, get married if you can to help that out, right? It's healthy if you're burning with passion.
Yes.
Scripture says,
yes,
it's healthy to get married, but it doesn't, it's not tight. It's not, your identity isn't lacking because if it's not there.
Right.
I don't think I said that very well in the end there, but
I think just one great resource to point to for guys struggling with porn is Fight the New Drug.
Okay, great.
Website, Fight the New Drug. Go and look it up because it's going to help you to understand the damaging effects of porn on your wiring in your brain, your perception of women, your view of the gift of sex.
Yeah, wow.
And it will damage and destroy sexual intimacy in your marriage.
Yeah.
That resource is for women as well, yes?
For both.
Yeah.
That's men and women. That's a good
and
distinction.
women.
Yeah.
It is brilliant. It's a great resource.
And talk to someone.
That's exactly
people.
right.
I guess people in that boat kind of feel like they're the only one struggling or something.
You're definitely not the only one struggling.
Not the only one struggling.
No, I've probably helped maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 guys through a porn journey.
I think it's also important to note that it's not a men-only problem.
That's true.
It's not a men-only struggle, I guess.
Yeah.
That there's the percentages, much higher than I probably used to be. Maybe
I think
because of accessibility.
Like 39% now.
Yeah,
It's women versus 61%.
Yeah. So it's whilst we often sort of go straight to that stereotype of it's just men who watch porn, but it's not the case.
Yeah.
So
no, it's a good point.
There's resources for both.
Yes, that's great. Fight the New Drug is that website. Talk to someone. Definitely. Get it talk it out. I think just hiding having this stuff. Dealing with it by yourself in the dark is not going to help.
That's right.
Talk to people.
Bring it into the light. Get rid of some shame.
That's exactly
right. The shame will take you out.
Other people have walked through it. Other people have gotten through it.
Absolutely.
And they're healthy.
There's freedom.
Free of it.
Yeah. It's for freedom that Christ has set us free.
So
that's right.
I think it'd be good to wrap it up there because there's a whole other discussion we could go down on that, which I think is probably required at some point. But I just want to say thank you for joining us on the podcast. Thanks Beck, for joining us. Dad's been here for a while. But
good job, babe.
Thanks for joining us. And I just love what you guys are doing and speaking into marriages. And you guys are an incredible example for Jess and I. And we want to thank you for being a great example of healthy marriage. I love that you're like, oh, it's not perfect. I'm like, great, I can relate. Thank you.
Thank goodness.
And I think that was just a great conversation. Obviously, we touched lightly on a lot of topics. We can't cover everything possibly. I'm sure there were things people were like, talk more about that. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Comment, get in touch with us, and maybe we can talk about this again in another podcast and go deeper on some things. Yeah. But thanks for being with us. And this has been a great conversation.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.